Greetings, dear viewers, listeners. This is yet another edition, the June edition of our Applied Professional and Executive Coaching 101 conversation brought to you by COMETSA Global Online Channels, hosted by myself, Sam Tsima, from here in Johannesburg, South Africa, and my co-host, Coach Mishti, based in Mumbai. And we always say that in the Asian side of the globe. Greetings to you, Mishti. I'm from the continent of Africa, and we have just celebrated the Africa Week
Wow.
last week, and we are currently experiencing the sitting of the Pan-African Parliament. And I must tell you, it is incredible what is going on there. And thanks to media technology, we get to get snippets of the diversity of engagement there. So we are great. Some people say is hectic, is very lot of conflict. I said no, it's not. It is just what Africa is, and we are getting to see ourselves for who we are. So with those few ways, I want to welcome you. It's always pleasure to have you, and I want you to say a few ways, greet our viewers and listeners, tell them who you are, and introduce our guest, and then let's enjoy the show.
Absolutely. Greetings, Sam, and thank you yet again for having us here. It's always a pleasure. Greetings and a very warm welcome to all our wonderful listeners who have tuned in. My name is Mishti Verma. I am a Gallup Strengths coach, a gender sensitization expert, and a behavioral and leadership facilitator. I'm also a partner at OD Alternatives. And today we have a very interesting conversation that's going to be happening with yet another fantastic coach who's a senior talent development leader with over 20 years of experience, and he's also an EI certified coach and an RCS certified coach. And you must be wondering what these terms are. So, without further ado,
Yeah.
may I introduce to you the very talented Amit Anand.
All right, thanks a lot. I'm just always a little overawed by these kind of introductions, you know. So thanks a lot for this opportunity. Wonderful to talk to you people. I've known Mishti for some time. It's great talking to you, Sam. So thank you for this opportunity. As far as I am concerned, like Mishti said, I have been a part of human resources, and I never planned to be a part of human resources for about 20 years. I actually did my civil engineering at one point of time, and I worked on the first ever metro project in India for about 2 years. And after working there for about 2 years, I said to my dad that I can't do it anymore. My dad is a civil engineer. My elder brother is a civil engineer. I didn't have much of a choice, really. In fact, I remember when I was getting admitted into college, I was getting mechanical engineering as a stream, but I was not allowed. My father was just standing behind my shoulder. He said civil. And that is what happened. So, yeah, I was there for about 2 years, and I said, I can't do it anymore. It just does not, you know, interest me much. I'm not very passionate about it, not enjoying it. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're an engineer, I'm an engineer. You know, we don't know about job opportunities. And somewhere down the line, if you carry on in this line of work, I can look out for you. I said, but Dad, that's not going to happen. I don't want to. And then I moved out of it eventually, and I moved out in the middle of the threats which were given to me by my father of ostracizing me. And but anyway, so that's I moved into training first of all, Sam, and I moved into language training initially. For about 2, 3 years, I just taught people how to speak in English.
Mm.
People were preparing for the TOEFL exams or IELTS, and I was working for industries, which is the IETS industry or the BPO industry at that time, and I was training people on the RP English, which is Received Pronunciation, also called the Queen's English. So I never planned for all of it, but I saw a guy doing it and I was quite mesmerized by it. And I thought I can do this. I mean, this is something which is right down my aisle, so to speak. And I tried for it and they selected me as a language trainer. And one of the things about becoming a language trainer is that it gives you such wonderful grip on the language that when you move on from language training to other kinds of trainings, you are able to control the sessions and people a lot better, and then eventually it adds to your coaching skills as well. And all of this was, like I said, not planned. And after language training, I got a little bored of just language training, and I wanted to get into management training and coaching, and all these things were attracting me. And that's when I moved from my hometown, Delhi, which is the capital of India, to Pune, which is very close to where Mishti lives, which is Mumbai. It used to be called Bombay. In fact, a lot of people still call it Bombay. And I was there for 15 years. And that's where, for the first time, I got certified as a transformational leadership coach by a company called Result Coaching Systems, when I was working for an organization called Electronic Data Systems, which was then bought by Hewlett and Packard. So that's how I found myself, in this coaching universe, so to speak. It was very interesting at that time, and it still is quite interesting.
Mm. I
Yeah.
can relate to what you're saying. I can see that you are measured the way you are communicating. Has that got to do with the insights into what language knowledge does to your communication way?
I think so. I think so, because when I started out as a language trainer, I was trained by a company called Communicate in London.
Mhm.
So I had to change it, and then I trained thousands of people on it. So it kind of stayed in my system. It was quite terrible at one point of time.
Mm.
Actually. It was
Uh,
so much anglicized at that point of time that people used to get irritated by the way I used to talk. But when I changed industries from ITES, I got into IT consulting, which was electronic data systems, Hewlett Packard. And then I moved into manufacturing, where a lot of people don't even prefer to talk in English, especially if you go to the manufacturing floor. They talk in their native. So then I
Mm.
had to mellow it down. So this is a very mellowed down version of what it used to be at one point of time.
uh, that's great sharing, Amit. Um, there is a benefit of mastering language. You get to customize the language while speaking to other people. So if you're working with global cultures, you can do a bit of mirroring and matching, because you're also from NLP. So I'm using that word.
Yeah.
So you can, customize the language, you can customize the accent, or you can even match the accent with other people to create more rapport. So, does that help somewhere when you're coaching people from other countries?
Tremendously, tremendously. As much as I have irritated my audience in India,
Mhm.
it has helped me wonderfully well. When I had gone to the US for the first time, I had my session in Minneapolis for the first time, and people were asking me all kinds of questions. Are you from India? Doesn't seem like that you're from India. Have you been to the UK? So on and so forth. And so it was very easy to connect with them. It was very easy for them to connect with me, because I think when it comes to cadence, which
Mhm.
is the music of the language, if you're able to match it, then it makes your audience more responsive because I think they're able to relate to you as far as their auditory capacities are
Mhm.
concerned. It becomes a lot more easy for them to respond to you. And the same thing happened in Indianapolis as well. And some of them actually did kind of compliment me at that point of time that, you've got a very good mastery over the language. And whatever you said, Mishti, apart from the fact that it becomes a lot more easy if you're operating in an international, you
Mhm.
know, dimension. The other thing that I have found is that if you, and it is not recommended at all, but if you have not mastered your subject and you're holding a session by virtue of your expertise on the language, you can get away. In the sense
That,
you can, in the sense you can
that,
involve
that
other
is
people.
the point. Sorry, that's the point I wanted to ask you as to how is the language helping you in your coaching, and what does it help you to achieve? You have just answered that I guess your mastering of the language has impact on your interaction with people. And how so is that in coaching?
I think a big part of coaching, according to me, is your ability to ask pertinent questions and timely questions, right? And sometimes people will struggle with it. People get certified, and because it's not their native language, they struggle to make questions at the right moment. It's all about timing.
Mhm.
And over there, I think I perhaps am a little comforted because of the way I think in the language and I talk in the language. So it does not really bother me. I don't have to really stop and, gather my thoughts and think about them in the first language, then translate them, and then put a question. And by that time, the movement has gone. So that way it helps me quite a bit. So one is
Yeah.
the relatability, the other one is your ability to be able to induce questions at the right moment. Helps a
Mm.
lot.
I think another thing is also the command over the voice. I mean, we are speaking about words, the language, but also because I think you must be also trained in voice and accent, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh
it's the
my God.
command. Yeah, yeah. I've also been, so I can relate to that. So how you modulate your voice as a coach is also important. This is an aspect that often people don't talk about, but when you're doing a creative visualization in the coaching experience, or if you're just trying to demonstrate empathy or connection, is the modulation of the voice that plays a large role. So what do you
Yeah.
think on those aspects and some of your insights around that?
I think it absolutely does. What you're saying is completely true. Um, One of the things that is essential when it comes to a coaching conversation is the coaching contract. Okay, there's a
Mm.
coaching contract, which I will essentially, share with the individual, where the rules of engagement are mentioned in that coaching contract. I mean, you can have your own coaching contract if you want to create it. And in that coaching contract, I mean, I always lay it down for people that I'm going to be an assertive coach, that
Mhm.
I'm going to push you, that I'm going to
Mhm.
be a provocative coach. Okay. And if the person agrees to it, then only the coaching conversation will ensue. Otherwise, it does not. And when it comes to assertion and provocation, that part plays a big role, you know. I mean, I can go to the point of asking an individual for him or her to be able to self evaluate or self assess, ask a question to the point, do you have that in your DNA?
Mm.
And I've done that, and more than often it bore good fruit. So yeah, I mean, it's a big part of
Mhm.
your interpersonal skill. It's a big tool in your arsenal as a coach. Your language, your mastery of it, your modulation, your inflection, your intonation, all of it wonderfully
You,
helps
you,
you.
you made me feel like I missed a particular module in my coaching training, which will be called mastery of the language as a coach.
No, I just believe, apart from that, I think one of the things that helps you as a coach is the silence between your words. You know, I mean, you're able to somehow, um, master that. It does allow you to think better. It does allow you to listen better, and it allows the other person comfort that they don't feel any push or force that they have to respond to a question immediately.
Absolutely, Amit. It's the power of the pause. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, and then the power of the pause is also holds that power of reflection, and it creates that holding space. As a
yeah,
coach, you're providing that holding space, and with the power of the pause, what it also reminds me of is listening, active listening.
yeah,
The ability to really be there with all your senses and really listen. So
yeah.
how do you think listening shapes up a coaching conversation, and how relevant is that?
I mean, it's everything, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean, listening is a very big part of it, and I was talking about it with Mishti some time ago. One of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to uncover uh, deletions, because deletions they form distortions. What is a deletion? Deletion is lack of information. Okay, so when you're speaking to somebody and somebody says, I feel I will not be welcomed in that forum. So there is a deletion over there that you want to delve into as a coach. Okay, so you want to ask a simple question: that what gives you the impression that you will not be received well in a forum? Okay, and over there, the answer, would perhaps eradicate or eliminate that deletion, and then you'll move on to the next part of the conversation. But if that did come up after you asked the question and you did not hear it, then it's a complete loss of an attempt to, eliminate deletion. So the whole idea is, which is a part of the meta model in neurolinguistic programming as well, is that when you're speaking to somebody, you want to remove all deletions so that the person then eventually has an informed understanding of the scenario, and therefore the distortion is removed of how he looks at a particular scenario that is being talked about. Okay, now deletions can be caused by your own experiences, okay, by your own assumptions, by generalizations, by stereotyping, and sometimes when, well, that question has not been asked, which will provide more information of that context, right? So as you are asking questions, you're looking for answers, you've got to be able to detect the answer at times in all the, you know, verbosity that you have to handle when you get the answer from the individual. That's where listening becomes important. You have to, so there's this term called, a very nicely mentioned in the book, called Quiet Leadership by David Rock. And that was my first certification by Result Coaching Systems, where they speak about listening for potential, listening for
Mhm.
where the person is going in a thinking process. Okay, so you have to then, kind of remove some of the peripheral stuff that is coming out of that person's mouth, and you want to be able to, you know, put your finger on that potential that I spoke about that can move you in that conversation, right?
Is that the same as listening with interest?
Listening with interest, yes, will allow you to listen for potential. And when you listen for potential, you listen from head to toe.
Mm.
You do not listen for what is coming out of the mouth only. You know, your facial expressions, how the person is talking to you, the nudges, the flinching, the disagreement in the non-verbal language that you have to keep an eye out for as a coach. You know, the fiddling with the hands, the moving of the leg, all of it. That's where you are able to provide yourself an opportunity of, asking a reflective question. Now, what are reflective questions? Reflective question is when you're reflecting the emotion that you're detecting while
Uh-huh.
talking to the person, and you say, well, that upsets you.
Mm, mm,
Or did I press the nerve, so on and so forth. But how would you do that if you're not listening for potential, which is not only relegated or confined to words, but the nonverbal language itself is essential. And listening is a big topic. According to me, your own self can prevent you from listening to what could have possibly come your way. So if somebody's talking to you and that upsets you and that comes on your face,
mm, mm. Is that a good practice as a coach to to expose myself to my client in terms of how I feel about the way they are responding to my coaching to them or my asking questions? Is it the right practice, or should I keep that to myself? Because I
I think
guess that is also part of listening, because something is happening to me as a
correct,
result of how they are responding to my questions.
correct. Yeah. So I mean, you can talk about all the coaching models in the world: the Grow model, the Oscar model, the Create model. You know, there's a 5-step model by a company called Psychological Associates. But usually, there comes a point in the conversation where you're just supposed to gather information,
Mm. Forget
right?
about your models and your tools and everything. Just listen.
Yeah. And when you're gathering information, you cannot induce information. And you are inducing information if you're getting upset by what you're listening to, because that
Mm.
stops the person in his or her tracks, and then the person does not share more.
Wow, Mishti,
It's
that's
fantastic, actually. Yeah.
yeah.
So there is,
You are thinking, Mishti, because I can see you enjoying what you are hearing.
yes, actually, it reminded me of a concept. Actually, I was speaking to Amit earlier, and we were talking about the difference between counseling and coaching. So there's a
Yeah,
concept of self-disclosure to, create more rapport, where if the other person's not feeling very comfortable, so you talk about some experiences from your life to make that person feel comforted. So Amit was talking about, being very careful about not diluting the focus, and the
yeah.
focus here is the client. So, do you use any self-disclosure techniques to bring in more comfort, even if it drives you to be a little vulnerable at times?
I think my whole agenda and attempt is for the other person to be vulnerable.
Okay.
I'll do everything to
Mm-hmm.
effect that,
Mm-hmm.
to feel comfortable and share more and be vulnerable, to give the person that sort of a comfort zone. So it's all about the individual. It's not about me. And
Okay.
I would try to stay as neutral as possible. But to the point that you were talking about, it's a very vital point. People do not understand it, which is that coaching, or you say mentoring, or you say counseling, or you say psychotherapy. These are all different things, right? Coaching is just about moving forward. It's always about the future,
Wonderful.
right? Coaching is about transformation that happens as you talk, as you speak, as your sessions happen with that individual. It's about you to be able to ensure that the person is able to, reconcile his own mind maps or neural pathways and stumble upon information all by himself or herself because you ask the right questions. That's coaching. But if you talk about mentoring is nothing like coaching. And people would talk about both the things in the same breath. It irritates me
Yeah.
quite a bit. But mentoring is first of all, it's a longer duration. It happens over a long period of time. And mentoring is where, I mean, if I am someone's mentor, my job is to share experience with that individual. You share your experience in mentoring with someone who wants to achieve a particular goal. Okay, so you would say, well, when I tried it, this is what happened, so on and so forth. But as a coach, you're not supposed to do that. So it's completely different, right?
Mm.
But if you talk about counseling, it is about dealing with a past issue. Coaching is about moving forward. Counseling is about dealing with an issue, which is on the past, right? And counseling has certain milder techniques, which are often used by certified counselors. Again, there's a completely different school of thought or education assigned to it. And then you come to psychotherapy, which is another, you know, more serious intervention, so to speak. Psychotherapy. You need to be a certified psychotherapist, and at the same time, you use stronger techniques as a psychotherapist.
Mm.
And then you come to
That's
Uh,
psychiatry, which is another step wherein you involve medicines as well, which is
mm,
about clinically ill
mm.
patients.
It's very important what you are addressing now, Amit, because we need to be clear not only for ourselves but also for our clients,
Yeah,
and also continuously catch ourselves doing this where we cause the confusion. I mean, with mentoring and coaching, because there are times where the clients will be happy to receive a solution from you, but you know very well that that's not coaching, and if you fall for that, you must be able to take yourself out of that. What is your view there? Because I do find myself a number of times, because I'm an ex-HR practitioner and HR director, and I'm coaching HR person, and I can see the person is really looking for a solution because this thing is
yeah,
urgent, but I have a contract coaching.
yeah. That is always that is a slippery slope, so to speak. I was talking about this with Mishti, and I was saying that one of the things that I did and I have been doing and still have to do as a part of my job is to teach leaders about how to coach, right? In a lot of organizations, that is happening because coaching is so powerful. But somehow that setting or that dimension does not allow it to be conducive to coaching. If I'm the boss and I have a work plan, and my work plan branches out into the work plan of the individual who reports into me, and there are timelines, you know, which are putting pressure on me, during that coaching conversation, it's very possible that I will get into a consulting mode. I will
Yes.
start
mm,
providing solutions. So from a coach, you become a consultant. It's very, very easy because that situation, the situation as such. So that's what I've been telling a lot of people, but organizations do not agree to it more than often. But if you have a coaching framework in the organization, in that case, your coach should not be your boss, according to me. In fact, your coach should not be from your function either.
Yeah.
If I'm a coach, I'm an HR practitioner, I would rather be coaching somebody from supply chain management or finance, some of these functions, operations, but not from HR. That should be avoided, according to me.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Now, tell us something more about this program. You said you've spoken about the challenges that leaders have their own agendas to drive, so it becomes very difficult for them to stay neutral to the
Yeah,
experience of coaching.
yeah, yeah.
But has there been any merits? Have you seen some leaders who are open to such experiences, or who can set aside their roles as leaders and managers and create more listening experiences or certain sharing circles or experiences or coaching conversations for their subordinates? Has there been any merit or success out there, or it's overall
Yeah.
been a challenge?
Yes, yes, there are. There are quite a few.
Mhm.
I do not know about South Africa and the culture over there and how things are when it comes to a corporate over there, but you know, the culture tends to be quite hierarchical in Indian corporates, and one of the things that happens is when you introduce people to a concept such as coaching. Um, One thing that happens is that you uh, induce a certain level of civility in people in the way they speak to their direct reports.
Mhm.
Okay, so it becomes less hierarchical, so to speak. The other thing is that usually coaching conversations are structured. So the grow model or the create model, which is one of my favorites, or the Oscar model, or any other model has different junctures within that coaching conversation. So it gets very structured and it compels some of these individuals who are terrible listeners to listen. It forces them to apply themselves when it comes to becoming a better listener, when it comes to getting the information from the individual that they are talking to. Although invariably they might slip into becoming a consultant, but their demeanor changes and becomes a lot more civil, um,
Mhm.
and a lot more pleasant, uh, which perhaps helps the overall culture of the organization eventually over a period of time. Right.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So
We,
that,
we as coaches, we do a lot of work on ourselves
yeah,
when we are in a conversation like this. I'm asking myself right now as you speak, you're probably reflecting on what you will, people will call it a perspective. In other words, things that you have done, things that have happened to you, your whole journey that
yeah,
contributed to what you are now.
yeah,
And
yeah.
have you ever had any regrets or felt that you could go back and change certain things that are coming up now in your way of being? I mean, you did share with us that you suffered a lot when people thought that you were not in the Indian English.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that in your journey that you would like to look back at and say, I wish I could address this.
Um,
Is there something called Indian English? Because we talk about African English,
right.
which is not English, Oxford English. Yeah, I don't know. You get my point.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I do think of it because more than often people form an opinion of me on the basis of how I talk. The
Hmm.
first impressions are usually bad, and if the first impression is bad, then it takes a lot of time. At least takes about 3 4 meetings for the individual to then, well, revisit his opinion of me, saying, yeah, he's not that bad a guy. you know. Uh, and I have tried quite a bit in that direction, but it just takes away from me my expression, my
mm,
ability to
Mm.
emote and express things effectively.
mm, mm,
And I don't want to allow that.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, Amit. And, you know, from the interaction that we've been having today, I realized that the language context that you keep talking about has a music of its own. Uh, that is
Mm.
your personal style. You know, he has a certain music and rhythm in terms of
Yeah,
how he
yeah.
operates. There
And
is
I
his
think,
own
and
unique
I think you
structure.
can,
Yes.
I think you can relate to it more than anybody else because you're into
Mm.
theater and whatnot. I mean, emoting and modulation and intonation and whatnot. I think I'll freeze if I'll be on a theater stage.
Well,
So
I feel all facilitators, coaches, trainers are all performers.
yeah,
At some point they're always they need to
I, I,
create.
I
Uh,
I call it an art-based performance,
yes, yes,
not
yes.
a
Because
job-based. It's an
yes,
art-based
absolutely.
performance.
Absolutely. I used to teach a course called the art of communication. So I think
Right.
art comes in everywhere. It's the art of coaching, the art of listening, the art of conversation, and the art of communication. But what I was trying to say was, listening to the way you have described coaching, there is a certain music to it
Right.
because you talk a lot about where the pause should happen, where the assertion should happen. So the rise, the pause, the
Mm,
fall of your coaching notes, if I may say so.
right.
And also, taking it forward to the final act or the final music piece. So there's an orchestra out there. So you're talking a lot about the future. So creating this whole composition that comes to that that creates that whole momentum. So this is how I've been visualizing while you have been sharing your experience. So I just wanted to know, is your style like that, or is it something that I'm inducing from our conversation?
No,
You
I think
see music in your
it
style
is.
of,
It
yeah.
is, and if there is a barrier to that, then it just takes
Mm.
away my effectiveness
Mm.
completely.
Yes, yes.
And the cadence and the music of all of it that I keep talking about is what allows me to, come up with very important and pertinent questions at the right moment.
Mm.
Because
That's wonderful.
music makes it more intuitive, the whole
Absolutely.
conversation, doesn't it? Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. Another thing, you've been speaking a lot about coaching in terms of the future, like, the potential that's there, the possibilities that are there for the coaching, and
Mhm.
driving the conversation towards future possibilities or future goals. I also
Yeah.
want to bring it back to the present because presencing the here and now, the mindfulness that's needed in coaching. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on mindfulness and presencing, and if the coachee is getting distracted, how to really bring those thoughts in the here and now?
I think one of the things which is extremely essential
Mhm,
is for you to be able to evaluate
mhm,
um, the overall, climate in which you're holding that conversation. It has to be conducive to coaching, and that's why I give a lot of importance to the coaching contract. Because in
mhm,
the coaching contract, I would mention it that we will hold when we hold the coaching conversation, which is completely up to you as a client. Okay, um, at that moment, we would want to be able to hold it in a climate that does
mhm,
not take anything away
mhm.
uh, from the session.
Okay.
right? Because as a coach, when I sit down with somebody, my intent is to help out the person.
Hmm.
I want the other individual also to have that intent and not be distracted. So I leave it to the person in the coaching contract to tell me, when do you want to hold the conversation? But once you
Okay.
sign on the dotted line, then it is your responsibility as well that the conversation moves us into the future. Okay, because I
Hmm.
am going to get paid for that 50 minutes or 1 hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a little bit of accountability on you as well.
Hmm.
Mm, mm.
Right?
Wow. I'm
Hmm.
very curious to hear more about the type of coaching that you mentioned that you are experienced in. You mentioned the transformational leadership coaching, and you mentioned the results. What do you call the results? Uh,
Results.
RCS.
Yeah,
yeah,
result coaching. Yeah, system. Yeah,
just for the benefit of everybody out there, myself included. Just talk through those a little
coaching
bit.
concepts. Yeah, so I mean, I think RCS is one of the best in the world, and they are affiliated to ICF as well. One of the best things about ICF is that it has a follow-up model as well. Okay, so you can hold the conversation using the CREATE model, which
Hmm.
is just an acronym for the current reality, first of all, and then you move on to exploring alternatives, where you are trying to listen to potential, and when you listen for that potential, you tap into the energy.
Mm,
Hmm.
mm,
That's the CREATE
mm,
model. It's quite efficient. And then once you have had that conversation, you want to have another session with the individual that can begin with the feeling model. So just think about this: you did the create model, and then the coachee has decided to take some steps. Okay, so you want to talk about those steps in the next session. How do you do that? You do that by using the feeling model, which is quite brilliant. So you talk about, so what happened? What are the facts of it?
mm,
When you were doing that, when you were taking those steps, what are the emotions that you were undergoing? So you're trying to
mm,
deepen, that mind map because the person's tried something new. And when you did do so, as you were, undergoing some of those emotions, and you unravel those emotions, you then ask the other person, how does it encourage you to now do things differently? Okay, so that's the next E of the feeling model. And as you did this exercise, you took this step. What was the learning out of it? So that's the L.
mm,
And as you did this entire exercise, what are some of the new implications?
mm,
And then what's the next goal? So it takes you
mm,
to the next goal for another coaching conversation, if
mm,
needed be. So that's what makes it so effective, that it has a very good follow-up model. But another thing about the coaching model, which I got introduced to quite late in my life, was in 2013 when I was working with a firm called Psychological Associates, where they introduced the concept of you know quadrant 4 leadership. Okay, and so that was quite interesting in the sense that you first of all identify the behavior of the individual that you're talking to, although you use the same coaching methodology, but you use the same methodology differently. Okay,
mm,
so basically what it does is, I don't know, I mean, you would know about this. I think in the 70s, I think 78 or 79, there was a model for identifying behavior called Blake and Mouton.
mhm,
Hmm.
Right? It's got two dimensions, and the first dimension is the people orientation. Rather, the first dimension is the task orientation, which is on a vertical axis. Okay, and your task orientation becomes better as you move from bottom to top, right?
Hmm.
And then the other dimension is your people orientation. As you move from left to the right on this axis, the horizontal axis, your people orientation increases. Okay. So the whole idea was that you're left with 4 quadrants, and the first quadrant is quadrant 1, which is a kind of a behavior wherein you only want to talk about work, but your people orientation is extremely poor, and you're exhibiting and demonstrating extremely authoritarian ways of leadership, which is not leadership, really, right? And then you have another behavior, which is the Q2 behavior, which is not good on task orientation, neither is good with people. So basically, it's the behavior of an individual who is defeated. It's the behavior of an individual who doesn't know what to do next. Right? And then there's another behavior, which is the Q3 behavior, which is the behavior of an individual who doesn't want to talk about work, but is extremely social. He will flatter you, he will say, boss, you're right, you're the best. But when you talk about work, the person will meander. And then we have the Q4, which is a way of leadership, a way of talking to people or speaking to people or interacting with people, where your eye is on the target, on the task, but you are completely aware of the potential that people bring to the table. So you involve those people. So that's the cue for leadership. So when you're a coach and you're working with the Q1, you have your own challenges. Okay, because you want to bring to the notice all the deletions that he has, constructed, because he never involved people. So there's a lack of information there, right? But when you're talking to somebody who's a Q2 behavior, then in that case, you're dealing with a completely different behavior. Now, here is this person who needs to be brought out of his shell. That's your job as a coach, to first of all do that. Then only a good conversation can possibly happen. And then you're working with the Q3 behavior, your challenge would be to control that meandering and bring the person to the task. Right? So challenge is different now. You're using the same model. You can use Grow, Oscar, whatever model you want. There are a lot of them, right? But when you're speaking with somebody who's Q4, demonstrating a Q4 behavior. So here's a person who's got his eyes on the job and is also completely aware of the power of the perspective of people, the buy-in from people, the acceptance from other people. And this will be a different conversation for you as a coach. Right?
Am I right to say that certain professions actually drive people to this type of behaviors? And that's where the perspective comes in. And you'll hear people saying that an engineer will find difficulty to deal with people because the profession itself doesn't really put price or preference or interest, or I don't know how to put it. And then you get an engineer becoming a CEO, and then you have results that deliver that are excellent, but people are driven like slaves.
I think apart from your position, it's also about your situation. It's a big function of it, the behavior that you exhibit and demonstrate. So I'll give you an example. Okay, so here's this guy, who wants to work with people in a cross-functional team. He's got no authority over people. He doesn't have positional power. He needs to get work done. He has to be Q4. He cannot just order them around like a Q1, right? So he has to collaborate. He has to listen to them. He has to work with them. He has to negotiate with them. He has to, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You do this for me and I do that for you, sort of a thing, which is nothing but Q4 behavior. Now, this same person, after he is done with his meetings, with all these cross-functional team members, comes back and has a meeting with his own team. Now he's got positional power over these people. He's the boss, and all of a sudden starts acting in Q1 behavior, which is all about work, 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 not listening to them. And his skills go for a toss of listening, which he just exhibited maybe about 10 minutes ago when he was in another meeting. Right? Now, this same individual, he goes to his boss, and then he becomes Q2. In his shell, doesn't talk much, very measured, very cautious, doesn't take any risks, doesn't want to be punished, feels insecure in that conversation. And when this whole thing gets over, the office is over, he goes to a pub, he sits with his friends, and he becomes Q3, which is not doesn't talk much about work, but just about people, gossip, 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 right? So any person can demonstrate any kind of behavior, right?
So what you're saying, Amit, is it is very situational.
It
It's very
is.
context driven,
It is.
right?
And,
Yeah.
and that's why I never said Q1 person, Q2
Mhm.
person, Q3 person. I said Q1 behavior, Q2 behavior, Q3 behavior,
I
Q4.
understand. So, along with behaviors, you're also certified in a lot of personality assessments like MBTI.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
also as a talent development professional, I wanted to ask you, while you're coaching and with all these assessments that talk about a certain personality, how do the two blend in together? Do you look at these assessments as well? Or, in fact, when you're doing behavioral modeling, you also keep in mind the core personality of someone? Uh, are you mindful of that?
Yeah, I mean, you can be mindful of it if it is a part of the coaching contract.
Hmm.
So if you were
Okay.
to hold a coaching conversation with somebody
Mm-hmm.
and the person is completely comfortable bringing, or first of all, undergoing an assessment and then,
Hmm.
then bringing those results to you, then that allow you to sometimes uh, prepare yourself as a coach so that you
Hmm.
can ask some questions vis-a-vis, some of those things that you just came across through those reports, right? Just
Have
give
you
me a
used assessments in your coaching conversations or your facilitation experience?
A lot of times, yeah.
Okay. Some of those experiences you could share, with MBTI because you've worked so much in that space. Amit, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah. So I was saying MBTI is one of the most extensive tools
Mm-hmm.
uh, in comparison to some of the other tools that I'm certified in. I'm also certified in TKI and FireBee. And when it comes to MBTI, uh, you come across the personality of the person.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you know about the mental modes of that person as well. Now, this is
Mm-hmm.
type two personality dynamics that a lot of people don't venture into, which basically tells you that there is a primary mode, which is
Mm-hmm.
your most strong suit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is the auxiliary, which kind of supports the primary. And the third one and the fourth one are your weak mental functions. Now, those weak mental functions are weak because naturally you're inclined to not use them. And when you do not use those functions, then those functions remain weak. Now, that's where, as a coach, you want to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you talk about me, INTP, I'm introverted, intuitive, I'm thinking, and perception, or I'm more of an explorer, etc. My weakest function are the details. Now, if somebody has to coach me and he's got the report, you know, those are the details that he would want me to think about. He will bring those into the conversation through questions and compel me to think about those, where I have to exercise my weakest mental function, right? Not an extrovert for that matter, I'm not an extrovert. So it is important for the individual, if he has access to my report, to bring out all the quality of extroversion that I have not tapped into. Right? So, for example, I assume something, and that's a deletion again. It's a lack of information. I just made up my mind. Well, maybe these people will not give me that information or data. Something I just assumed. It all happens so conveniently. I assumed it because I'm introverted. Because somewhere I just don't want to connect with people. Right? And then the person might just ask me questions around, around that bit, that lack of information because of me being introverted, asking me questions about who are the people you've spoken to? How many have actually said that to you? So on and so forth. So in that way, the report helps you quite a bit. Similarly, if you're using TKI, which gives you, your conflict modes, as a coach, you are in a position to ask questions when you know what is the primary and secondary conflict mode of an individual. So my primary mode is avoidance, right? And my secondary mode is accommodation. More than often, I am not a person who would get into a compete mode, right? Confrontational mode. It just does not come to me at all, right? Or for that matter, the other modes of compromising or collaboration. My first and second mode is avoidance and accommodation, right? So in that sort of a scenario, if my coach has access to my report, he can explore some of the scenarios that I bring to the conversation and then ask questions about how did I deal with them. Maybe there were situations where I was supposed to compromise or collaborate or compete, but I was just avoiding and accommodating. You see that? So that's a whole lot of questions that you can ask as a coach. Similarly with Firebee as well, the same thing is applicable there too. Firebee basically is predicated upon 3 parameters. The first one is inclusion, the second one is control, and the third one is affection, right? And it is measured at 2 different levels. One is giving, and the other one is receiving, right? So when your report comes out, all of a sudden, in affection, the result is a score of 2, giving affection, which means I don't give affection at all. There's a possibility that there's a team member or there is somebody who's a member of my family who has also taken the test and has scored heavily on receiving affection. So this guy needs a lot of affection, but I don't give it. Right? So in that case, if the coach has access to that report, then that is a dimension that he can explore or allow me to explore by asking relevant questions in that particular arena. So these psychological instruments, or psychometric instruments rather, are quite helpful.
Absolutely. There is another psychometric assessment called Enneagram. You must be aware of that. So, okay,
No.
all right, then I won't get into that because that's another buzzword currently in the HR and personality assessment. But again, the objective is to understand the core of an individual and operate from that context. Rather than trying to alter a personality, try to guide a personality based on their core.
Right.
So
Often clients will not be excited about these tools because of the way we present them to them.
Yeah.
And I hear you saying that the purpose here is to get the message or create awareness for the client. How can we manage this? How do we position these tools? If in the process of coaching you realize that certain tool can help and you will want to present it and you don't want it to be stopped because of the mechanics of it. You want them to get to the point where they can see what it is and use in your conversation with the client.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part where you said you want them to get to the point, and after that there was distortion in
Yeah,
voice.
you are very much interested in what these tools reveal to the client so that you can enter into a conversation.
Right, right, right. I think one of the things
Because
about
there's a pushback most of the times from the clients, right?
there is there is a pushback a lot of times. Most of the times, yeah, there is the right choice of words, and there's a reason behind it. Okay, in my last organization, I was in a specialist role, and I was certified on all the three tools. And there were around 70 more practitioners of MBTI, but they were generalists, HR generalist. Um, they did not even know what is a PCI on MBTI, which is a Preference Clarity Index. They would talk in language that will fill me with frustration and anger because they would say, well, I mean, I had a discussion with that person, and that person seems, well, about 30% introvert and 70% extrovert. I was like, what are you talking about? You know, and so some of these people who are generalists that I worked with for about 9 years, it is something secondary for them. Okay. They get certified, the company pays for it, but you can only become better at administration of these tools as you do them over and over and over again. And I did I did hundreds of them. I was the most practiced practitioner in the Cummins world, not only in India. And that's one of the reasons that clients are not able to believe these instruments, because they're not administered properly. You know, when you are doing a debriefing of someone's report, it in itself is a skill. Again, Mishti, you've got to be very neutral, because if you're an introvert, as you talk about the entire tool, and you're speaking to the individual about this is what introversion is and this is what extroversion is, and then you seem to be more inclined and more emphatic about introversion because you're an introvert, you're just doing a very messed up job of the entire session. Right? And that's where people start misreporting themselves. And that's where they start losing that belief in the instrument. So according to me, it can only be provided to people who are actually in it full time and who have the passion for it and who themselves believe in it. I have seen senior leaders getting certified on these tools, and they say, well, all of this is okay and nice to hear in a classroom session, but these things don't work. You know, that is terrible.
And I assume, Amit, that most of your practice as a coach is with executives, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got executive clients as well. I've got clients at all levels in the organization. Right. So one of my first gigs as a coach was when I got certified by RCS. It was a two-pronged role, in the sense I was supposed to run a program for coaching skills for leaders, where I'm kind of teaching people coaching skills. The second one was about being a coach. So, you know, my name was on the internet website, you know, people could fix up an appointment, and, you know, I'll do coaching sessions over there. So it was not limited per se to a particular compensation class in the organization. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's
sorry, Mishti.
go on, Sam. I had
I
told Amit that we will be interjecting each other, so he's used to it. He's comfortable with it.
yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the role of coaching in leadership development. I mean, you've
Right.
touched on that a number of times, but this is where it's very easy for businesses to support interventions like coaching. But what role do you think coaching is playing or should be playing in developing leaders?
I think one of the things is that we've got to be very cognizant of the fact that we are in the information age, right? We
Mm,
are in the information age, and you can pretty much create anything by watching a YouTube if you have the raw
mm,
material for it at home, isn't it?
mm,
And you're surrounded by people, you've got education behind you, and you've got multiple experiences. So people are mostly trying to reconcile their own mind maps to get to a solution.
mm,
You know, if you are mindful of that as a coach, then you would be very, very particular about just improving the quality of a person's thinking. If you can change the way they think, if you can make them better thinkers, then you will not have these guys coming over to you again and again for the same kind of problem. And you are actually easing your life as a leader or as a manager.
mm,
And that's the biggest, utilization of the coaching methodology that people are completely oblivious to. They don't understand this bit at all. It's a very important part.
mm,
Because when you are just busy being a consultant all the time, that's a never-ending game.
Mhm.
You'll keep giving them solution, they will keep coming to you, and you will never be able to become lazy Larry. Lazy Larry is that guy, which I have created in my head, wherein, he's just busy with one leg over the other, and everybody thinks, what does he do? His team's working fine, and you know, he just doesn't seem to be doing anything at all. Because you're just having those meaningful conversations with people, which are
Mhm.
through the route of coaching. You're making your people more self-dependent and better thinkers.
mm,
You can
mm,
put your mind now to process improvement and learning and growth for of the organization and strategy and whatnot. You don't have to do firefighting every day.
mm.
Mhm.
Talk to me about how will you contract with leaders. I mean, leaders deal with so many multiple issues, and if somebody is referred to you as a leader that needs to be developed, they will probably tell you, we have with 1, 2, 3 that we want these people to improve on. But they probably also have 1, 2, 3 that they think they have to improve. You have that conflicting situations many a times.
That is true. And one of the things that you must impress upon when it comes to dealing with executives and leaders is that you want to keep the conversation extremely objective. So you've got to be able to furnish the objectives before the coaching conversation begins. And that's a
Mm,
part of contracting. You
mm,
want to
mm,
ask them a simple question: what are you looking for?
mm,
When it comes to the end of this conversation, where do you want to be? What do you want to get to? Right? So the problem statement has to be defined by them uh, in that coaching conversation. You've got to be able to establish the purpose, the benefit of the conversation, the issue at hand, the contextual factors related to it, as in when the person dealt with that issue in the past, what happens, so on and so forth. All of that information, if it's available to you, and then where do you want to be by the end of the conversation? If it does so happen, which happens quite a lot, uh, that the leader does meander a little bit. In that case, you've got to be able to interject politely and remind the individual of uh, the objectives of the conversation. If the person still chooses to talk about something else, then you've got to be able to take your coaching hat off and and tell the person that, well, if that is the case, then in that case we will talk about this, and we are no longer in a coaching conversation, and perhaps now I will wear a different hat, maybe, of a consultant, and that is also completely dependent on your subject matter expertise of whatever is
Mhm.
being talked about. So, yeah.
So you have been coaching people at different levels in the organization. Where do you find more resistance to coaching?
Of course, the senior folks.
Okay, they're more hardwired.
Yeah, they're more hardwired. They're
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if you are um, just uh, sticking to being a coach, then it's still okay.
Mhm.
But your conversations as a consultant with them
Mhm.
go awry very quickly,
Mhm.
very quickly. I'll have these senior leaders, talk to me about creating a learning solution. They don't know squat about
Mhm.
instructional system design or learning methodologies or adult learning principles. But just because they have experience and they have seen the world and they know how to talk in English and they know how to work on a PowerPoint presentation, they think that they can give me a learning solution. So they they try to teach me that, and I have to bear with that behavior and deal with it. Yeah, but yeah, with
Mhm.
senior folks, that is always a challenge. Don't want to rub them the wrong way.
Mhm.
Those are some fragile egos that you're dealing with at times.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one of the things, and one of the things about senior folks is that they're very good at the talk.
Mhm.
They will completely exalt concepts such as coaching and Q4 leadership for that matter, which is people oriented and task oriented and collaboration and commitment and motivation and giving people an environment where there is psychological safety and people can be vulnerable and talk about anything without fear of punishment. They're very good at the talk, but when it comes to that room where they are the boss, things fall off very easily. That's what I mean.
Mhm.
They're
So
just
what
a
are
bad.
some of the, yeah, yeah, I get that. So what are some of the techniques you would use to help them remove the hat of I know it all and just be vulnerable as a coach?
I think as a coach, you just need to ask them questions, and which can perhaps help them to validify whatever they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So if they are stressing upon or impressing upon a point rather aggressively, then you've got to be able to ask them questions that can help them to validify or evidence whatever they are saying or substantiate whatever they are saying.
Okay.
So
I often find that in companies where uh, coaching programs are successful, there will be one or two senior executives that are the sponsors of that program, formally or informally, in many cases, informally, that they
yeah,
themselves have progressed as a result of coaching and they believe in it. And in the exco, then they'll speak for it in support of the HR. HR sometimes battle to bring this across if there is no sponsor at the executive who really believes in this. So, and they will support the idea of not just coaching one individual, but making coaching program as one of the interventions available that the executives can reach. Having said that, though, I also feel that over concentration at the executive level, at the leadership level, creates problems because as people grow up to the top of the organization, only then they get exposed to coaching. But if you were to do it across the board, then you have people promoted already knowing the value of coaching. What is
yeah.
your view on that?
I think leadership sponsorship is extremely vital to having a culture of coaching in the organization. Extremely important, has to flow from the top. I know one of my leaders, one of my favorite leaders, when we introduced the coaching program at my last company, um, this person who is a managing director of a multi-billion dollar company was completely invested and interested in the program, so much so that it all started from first of all identifying what are the competencies you want to look for in your leaders, and the one of the top five competencies that they looked for was coaching and developing. In the
Wow.
same way,
It's
coaching and
interesting.
developing. And then this person, along with some of the other senior folks in leadership, scoured, multiple vendors across multiple countries, and then, collaborated with one company where they partnered with this company. It's not so just it was just dumped upon them. Partnered with the company, even in terms of what could be the contents of the program and
Mm.
what is it that they want their people to understand and learn through this coaching program. A coaching program which was in line with the vision of the organization. And they were the first ones to undergo the program.
Oh.
And then this person came to India, was a managing director and chairman of the company. And that's a 4-day program, the one that I used to run in India and in the US and Australia. And he said, me, along with my entire executive team, so it was him, it was the COO, it was the CFO, it was all the business unit directors. All of them took out 1 day of their time to undergo the program so that they understand the power of the program, okay? And decided that we will begin the program with compensation class 4 first and compensation class 3, and then we'll go down the order. Because they did not want to listen to this narrative that, you're running the program and then somebody tells you at the end of the program, well, I mean, all of that is good. I mean, it's filled me with euphoria and so much excitement and enthusiasm. But, well, does my boss know about it? You don't want that,
Mm.
right? So to your question, it's extremely important because when people would drop off this program, they had to now get an approval from the functional head. It was a part of their scorecard, leadership development. So yeah, it happened all across the demographic of this organization, the one that I'm talking about. Yeah.
Wow. Sure. Mishti, I think Amit should be a regular guest
Amit,
to
how
help
Amit is
us.
doing yes, Sam, I was just about to say that Amit is doing a training session for us today. he's,
Yeah, no,
he's
that's
donning
that's
his
beautiful.
facilitator's hat because he's given us some very useful information and insights and has really shared the very detailed understanding of different models. So I'm sure
Mm.
that that would benefit a lot of coaches who are tuned in.
It
So
does not help me at
very
all.
Certainly, certainly.
It does not
It
help me at
makes,
all.
yeah, it's really, I mean, your inputs have really made me think and remembered quite a lot of topics we have handled in my previous training programs. It just shows you how important it is to keep on going back to these topics
mm,
as coaches for ourselves, for our own benefit.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes, yes, and
Absolutely.
you seem to be very well versed with it. So so you
Thanks.
do spend a lot of time in on the content, is from what I understand. Your
Yeah.
structure, your content is very important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely vital for me, and it fills me with anger and angst and whatnot, bad feelings when I see other people diluting my line of work. You
Mm,
Mm,
know what I mean?
mm, Mm,
When other people take up the same subject and mutilate it, completely destroy it,
mm,
it just and that's what happens. I was talking about this, Mishti, that you work with
Mhm.
generalists and sometimes business leaders, and they will start telling you about how to create a learning solution, and they don't know the technicalities of the job at all. And then
Mhm.
we people who are specialists are reduced to just nothing but working mules.
mm,
It's very offensive because I think
Mhm.
the power is in the content. So you've got to be able to get the content right to the T.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can't
mm,
bother with that.
mm,
You cannot have an airy fairy understanding of it and just self-serve yourself when you're standing in front of people and talking on
Mhm.
these subjects. You're supposed to serve other people, not the individual.
Mhm. That's wonderful.
I sense that you are also very particular in terms of integration. I mean, you understand so many other processes. And as I listen to you talking, I can tell that you are meeting one of our requirements in this show. That's why we call it an applied. We want to hear how you apply all these things in a real
Correct.
life situation to support other processes, because we will be naive to think that coaching is a bulletproof. It is one of the many
Yeah,
interventions that you need to have, and the
yeah,
Mhm.
integration is very important.
absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, talking about integration and talking about the other practices that you've shared, I would be curious to know more about the current landscape in talent development in India. What are some of the best practices that are currently there, and how has coaching served in that context?
I think there are quite a few things which have, been around for some time, but have picked up more pace now when it comes to talent
Mhm.
management. Talent management is vast, isn't it? I mean, it's so broad. It starts from the beginning of the um, human capital supply chain and then the exit interview, so to speak, when somebody leaves the organizations. There are a lot of things that go into it. Um, yeah, I mean, I think organizations of a certain size start looking into talent management. Small
Mhm.
organizations are just busy growing, and they get to a point where they can't grow, and then they're like, oh,
Mhm.
well,
Mhm.
we've got to do something about the way we look at managing our talent, and that's when they open up their eyes. So yeah, I mean, talking about some of the practices that I've been a part of, and they've been quite rewarding. One of them is now organizations are trying to get the right kind of talent,
Mhm.
which means that if you've got a value system that you've created in your organization, then you want to hire for character. You don't only want to hire for technical skills,
Mhm.
right? So if you've
That's
got like skills like integrity, you've got a value called integrity, you've got customer centricity, you've got say accountability, right?
mhm.
You've got care as a value. You
Mm,
want to bring people into the organization who actually demonstrate these values. You want
Mhm.
a value alignment when it comes to
Mhm.
bringing people into the organization, because the whole idea is that, well, of course technical expertise is important but can be worked on, but if there's no value alignment, things will fall by the wayside invariably,
Yes.
especially when it comes to lateral hiring. So there's this whole concept of competency libraries and bars that is associated with it, which is called
Mhm.
the behavior anchor rating scale,
Mhm.
wherein you get to know that you've got insufficient evidence that the person is demonstrating a value, or sufficient
Mhm.
evidence, or ample evidence by holding interviews which are behavioral event interviews.
Mhm.
So that is a new thing that has picked up quite a bit. A lot of organizations automate it.
Mhm.
mm,
So uh, when you will say, they will ask you to give an assessment right at the beginning when you share your details with them, and you will have to take a couple of assessments based. First would be on their values, and second would be the expectations. And there's
Mhm.
expectation that is mostly about how they work in that organization, and
Mhm.
how they work in an organization is a big part of the
Mhm.
culture of the organization. So
Yeah.
invariably they're trying to ensure that there is cultural assimilation.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So,
very
you
interesting.
know, so that's a very, very big part that is happening these days, which is select for character,
Mm,
not only
okay.
for skills.
Okay. So when you're selecting for character, you're selecting for values, um, and the recruitment is happening in that context. I'm sure there's a lot of alignment to the current organization culture that's needed. So
Yeah.
that's what people are looking for, the correct match, or they're looking for some potential that can be groomed to fit in.
I think cultural assimilation is a little different than value alignment. I think most of the organizations are looking for value alignment, is that's more important, because if they have
Mm-hmm.
embarked upon a value such as integrity, there just cannot be any, diversion there, or you know or customer centricity for that matter. um, I think cultural alignment is something which can be something which can help you in efficiency in an organization, but can be
Mm-hmm.
a huge roadblock and a huge deterrent when you're
Mm.
trying to induce ingenuity, innovation, and a culture of
Uh,
invention and new ideas. And then, you're talking about DNI, which is
Mm-hmm. Yes.
diversity and inclusion. But so you
Mm-hmm.
bring difference into the organization, which is diversity is nothing but
Mm-hmm.
celebrating difference, isn't it? So you're bringing
Absolutely.
difference into the organization, but you cannot allow it to flourish, because then you say, well, we don't do it that way, you know, and that's just a terrible output of the
I
entire.
often wonder how the people work at the global headquarters of
Mm-hmm.
organizations and are charged the responsibility of such this type of programs. It must be very tough when you fly down into South Africa, into India, or into any other markets, and you're trying to have this cultural alignment. Must
Yeah,
be, and that's another topic that Mishti and I will always ask coaches. And how is coaching contributing to supporting companies deal with diversity and inclusion? It is
yeah,
Mm,
it's a very
yeah,
good
yeah,
topic.
yeah. So
absolutely.
people say this now connects to another school of thought, which is change management. And why do people not like change? Because they like predictability, right? They
Mm,
want to know what's going to happen in the next moment. This is so comfortable with it. When you induce difference into the organization, say regional diversity or gender diversity or diversity of any other kind, LGBTQ, people will immediately demonstrate resistance to it.
Mm,
Because they're just not used to the difference, because they
mm,
worked uh, in a setup where there has not been much of a difference. Everybody eventually ends up intuitively thinking the same way. When
mm,
you are in the organization, you become the organization, don't you?
mm,
Right?
mm,
And that's where, as a coach, if you see that resistance, you want to question that using
mm,
questions, just powerful probing as
mm.
to what is, making you so uncomfortable with this. Yeah, so that's where
Wonderfully
coaching
said.
can help. Yeah.
So, you know,
DNI
and
is DNI is a big. It's vital, but it is exceedingly misused
mm,
uh,
yes,
in organizations, and
yes.
that's
mm,
where it has a long journey. DNI itself as a
Mm,
subject has a long journey, because it has so much potential.
mm. And I actually love the idea of it being just a constantly present with all other processes. And also I like the idea of not being too excited and thinking that you'll be done with it because it's just going to be there. And as most people, sometimes people make the mistake and then they get fatigued of it. So now we have talked
Yeah,
about DNI forever. It is,
yeah,
it is, it is, it is just part of us, you know.
Right.
Absolutely. In fact,
You know,
yes, Amit, you were
yeah,
saying.
just about DNA, I mean, and that's, I just want to allude to what, Sam's talking about. It's just about making a start at times, in organizations when it comes to
Mm.
DNA. So it begins with representation.
Mm.
Mm,
We
mm,
know, we know that it will take its time to really, get it roots into the system and bring its potential to the system and tell people that it has a business case, guys. Uh, so you've got to make a start somewhere, and it starts just with, well, make it a part of the process, institutionalize it. And that's what one
mm,
of my,
Mm.
this leader that I spoke about, who was the managing director of the last organization, he said, well, I want 60% of the hiring from women colleges. I don't care.
mm,
I want to
Mm.
hire
mm,
you to do
mm.
it.
Wow.
That's what I wanted. I want to
Yeah.
move the needle. We will talk about inclusion later. Let's
Yeah.
start with,
Fantastic.
right? And then he went
Yeah.
on to say, the
Mm.
way the way the demographics are in India,
Mm.
the way the Indian map looks like, I want my workforce to look like that. So these many people from this
Mm,
state, these many people from this state, these many people from this religion, these many people from this ethnicity, so on and so forth. It all begins from just initiating that, and the
mm.
initiation is nothing but at least bring them into the system.
Yeah.
Mm.
I was telling Mishti that we had a case yesterday here of racism at one of the colleges where the parents and the students marched together to the college. And it was so beautifully done. And some people think that it's choreographed, but for me, I just like that they spend time on it, that they
Yeah,
could do placards with messages that are quite clear, nicely written, lifted up on the way, and the cameras were coming and they were sharing it. I just said this is actually the beginnings because some must start something. Now, taking
yeah,
forward is how
yeah,
the management is going to deal with it, how the country is debating about it. It's beautiful because now the statement is made. We must just now help people to take it to the next step. And I like the idea because one of the placards was saying, I want to be taught by the teachers that look like me.
Mm.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
this student who feel that the
It's
people that are
beautiful.
standing in front of them every day, they can't relate to them. They're talking
yeah,
about your hairstyle, your hair is not right, fix it. Now, this is a person of particular color saying to a black person and say, fix your color. But it is just the way they relate to that difference. And I really want one day, if you have time, that
hmm,
maybe, I don't know whether it will be coaching, but it will still be coaching. I mean, we need to bring it to the center because if people are struggling to even talk about it, that means
yeah,
people really
Absolutely.
need help.
Yes,
sure,
yes. It's very important to bring what's marginalized to the center. And
correct,
that's why DI is now being called diversity, equity, and inclusion.
yeah,
So,
Mm,
yeah, so
mm,
bring in that aspect of equity is very, very important. And what you shared, Amit, where the leader brings in a mandate, I think it all starts from there.
yeah,
Without
yeah,
without a mandate, the needle would not really move. But
yeah,
from diversity, things also need to move towards inclusion
yeah,
because just bringing in everyone in the party and they're not feeling included in the party,
yeah, yeah. You got to be
you
able to
know
dance.
I was asking them to dance. So, so that's then just diversity, not really
mm,
equity and inclusion. So I
mm.
think a lot of processes around inclusion, inclusive leadership, going over on, checking on implicit biases, going beyond unconscious biases. All of that is really important as ways to move from inclusion, from
Yeah,
diversity to inclusion. So,
yeah.
does coaching play a role somewhere there in, in checking implicit biases or unconscious biases and helping people move from diversity to inclusion?
I think one of the things about this whole journey of representation to inclusion, uh, it has to be a part of the scorecard of the leader.
Hmm.
The leader has to be assessed on it.
Mhm.
And if there are concerns that come out of it, then you can use coaching as a tool to mend that behavior.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it, because the company that I spoke about, which had 5 competencies, one of them was coaching and developing, it also has diversity
Mhm.
as a leadership competency.
Mm.
It had
Interesting.
talent management as a leadership competency, which basically said that, Dave, you're the hiring manager.
Mhm.
This guy is your team member. It's your talent. So you manage your own talent. That's a competency we're looking for in the leader. And we're looking for diversity and inclusion in the leader. So
Mhm.
there was a skill map for it, Mishti,
That's
which
interesting.
had it laid out how you are supposed to
Mhm.
ensure that the representation, the diversity that you have in your team, you're able to harness its potential by
Mhm.
including them, say, in team meetings. Because it's
Wonderful.
very likely that, some of these people who are in minority, when they are in a meeting and they are the different ones, right? And
Mhm.
everybody else is similar, it's very hard for
Mhm.
them to open up. Now, it's
Mhm.
whose job to ensure that these people get airtime. It is the leader's time. It is the leader's time to move in and make the person comfortable and shut other people, or should I say, just politely interject and say, let's hear from this person. What do you have to say about it? Those kind of behaviors have to be a part of the leadership scorecard if you want to transit
Absolutely.
from representation to inclusion.
Definitely. And I
So
think
that's
that's where
that's where the
yes.
OD comes in, Mishti.
Yeah.
Design workplaces.
Yes, yes. Yes, I was
Put it-
telling Amit about ODA today and what we do. Absolutely. And this
I'll give
also
you, I'll
links.
give, I'll give you such a beautiful example of inclusion,
Mm,
Mishti. In
mm,
this company,
yes.
the one that I keep talking about, they had a manufacturing plant
Mm-hmm,
making turbochargers
mm-hmm,
only for only women in that plant. At every station, there were women. All machine
mm-hmm,
operators were women. All managers were women.
mm-hmm.
And they made ergonomic changes to ensure that women are comfortable working in that plant environment. Now
Wow.
that's inclusion.
Mm.
That's
Fantastic. That's
yeah,
that is inclusion. Amit beautifully said. I've
yeah,
worked with a lot of women leaders, and gender sensitization's also been one of my core areas. So a
yeah,
lot of inclusion also starts with the infrastructure support, logistics.
yeah,
Mm.
It's not just about how people are included in meetings
yeah,
or in other spaces, but what is the inclusive infrastructure that you're providing for your
yeah,
employees? And it also
yeah.
links to the concept of psychological safety, what you were talking about earlier.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, if that is a mandate with leaders, then only people will feel safe to really, talk about what they want to speak up and so on. So any thoughts on psychological safety?
I think it's extremely vital. We are, so we, in this organization that I'm working for,
Mhm.
I've been given a very important task of accountability and care, and I have to come up with a task force, that will take care of accountability and care, and it all begins from nothing but trust, right?
Mhm.
If you are able to provide vulnerability based
Mhm.
trust to your people, that means you are
Mhm.
giving people not only physical safety, but psychological safety as well. Now, here is an
Fantastic.
environment of trust that you have given to people where the person has the psychological safety to actually very politely interject his own manager and say, well,
Mhm.
I have a disconnect with your idea.
Mhm.
And that's where the difference comes into play. If that psychological safety would have not been there, then the
Mhm.
person would have never spoken. If the person would have not spoken,
Mhm.
the value would have never come to the table.
Mm.
And the
Absolutely.
other the problem is that if you don't have psychological safety, people don't speak. When people don't
Yeah.
speak, when they have a
Yeah.
disconnect, then the problem is that, well, they don't buy into the idea, but they still have to do it because they have to pay their bills. They have to get the salary. So they don't buy into it, but they still do it. So they're just compliant. They are not committed. They don't take ownership. When they don't take ownership, there's a lack of accountability. When there's a lack of accountability, there is a complete inattention to results. And that shows in the bottom line. It begins with psychological safety.
Absolutely.
Extremely, extremely important. Yeah.
And I think psychological safety is really important from the inclusion perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it's very important. Um, yes, so Sam, with your permission, I was thinking that we've had conversations on different themes about coaching, and also the talent management landscape and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I would also now want to shift the focus to Amit Anand as a coach. Some of his
Yes.
dreams, some of his passions. He talks a lot about helping coaches see future possibilities.
Yeah.
So drawing his attention to his own future possibilities. What is his vision like?
I, ha-
And
I
yeah,
haven't had a good coach.
okay. So we will do that right now, right? But yeah, but it'd be very nice to know about Amit as a coach, and beyond the hat of a coach, Amit as a person, and how do the two link with each other, and what are some of your passions and dreams as a profession?
Yeah, I'll be very, very honest. I think I'm very, very aware of my limitations as an individual and as a professional. Uh,
Mhm.
when I found the results of all the assessments that I took, it might be a TKI or it might be MBTI or a FIRE-B or a Belbin inventory that I did a long time ago, nothing surprised me at all. Um, so I'm pretty clear about what I will amount to. Maybe there can be
Mhm.
somebody who can possibly show me the way where I can exceed my own expectations. But I think that I kind of, maybe I'm just so interested and passionate about talent management that my intention is pretty much limited to HRD, human resource development,
Mhm.
right? And then I want to gain more and more mastery
Mhm.
when it comes to all the craft this particular arena entails. Okay, and there are a lot of things that I'm doing for the first time now. Okay, because some of those were extremely transactional pieces. I've mostly been in leadership development and organizational development and learning and development, which are transformational pieces. And I'm doing talent management, which is a lot more than just OD, L&D, and leadership development and diversity and inclusion. But you have to also manage a performance management cycle. You have to implement an HRIS system. So, and these are some of the things that I just want to master. And somewhere down the line, uh, when I think that I'm completely saturated with all of it, then maybe I'll think about something else in the future. But yeah,
Mhm.
and I also have an intention because I don't know if some of the people have told me this that I do a pretty okay job of writing. So just writing some of my experiences as well. So I just want to write a
Mhm.
book as well, and some of
I
for
would,
some of these pieces. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I would love to read that book. And earlier on, you interjected by saying that talent management is the whole complete cycle, and I think that will be that I'm sure there will be a chapter in that book that that explore that deeper from the
Yeah.
perspective of where you have been. One of the
Correct.
reasons why we are having this conversation and we're having this Mishti and I, we are very much we love our two countries
Hmm.
because our two countries have history together, and not
Yeah.
only history, but our two countries are doing economy. Have got economical relationship. There is businesses both ways, but our two countries politically are also having a very strong relationship. So there the business case is very strong that we actually cross pollinate, and it will be really wonderful that we continue looking at areas where we can share the expertise and bring the relationship between the two countries at the personal level rather than leaving it at the political leadership level, because that's not how
Right.
we function. I mean, we
Right.
function at the level where we can relate to each other. And a
Right.
book that is available to our two countries, it doesn't matter whether it's written by you or somebody from here, it will be wonderful to bring to the show to talk about it. Like
Yeah.
we've mentioned now,
Absolutely.
diversity and inclusion is one topic that will have a strong interest by everybody in South Africa. But
Right.
talent too will do.
Yeah. It is a part of it, isn't it? D&I, recruitment, learning and development, leadership development, performance assessment, potential assessment, exit interviews.
Mm.
All of that is a part of talent management. And then you're left with HR operations.
Yes.
70% of what we do in HR is talent management, isn't
Mm,
it? So
mm, absolutely.
yeah, it's a big one, big arena.
Great stuff. I get this sense that before even you spoke about, Mishti, are you happy? Are you still having some more questions in terms of what his plans are?
No, please go on. If I have anything in mind, I would definitely ask, but I wouldn't want to interject you at this point. So
Yes.
you go on.
I wanted to say that I can sense passion for the corporate
Hmm.
life in you.
Right, right.
I'm convinced that you don't want to go and start something of your own there at the moment. Am I right?
I think I've got a lot of passion for the subject.
Okay.
Mm.
Really, I think of myself as a keen student of the subject itself, the one that
Irrespective of where you are
irrespective.
practicing.
I
Okay.
think I think the corporate actually kind of stifles sometimes uh, individuals who are passionate about the subject to bring the best solutions to the table. It's
Mhm.
just
Mm,
how corporates operate and work.
mm,
I actually wrote an article on it on LinkedIn some time ago, which is "Death of Specialists,"
Mm.
which pretty
good.
much talks about how we are shortchanged as specialists. Our dedication and devotions towards the subject, and we just want
Mm,
to bring it to the corporates so that it can benefit the corporates.
mm,
That's all
mm.
that we
Wow.
want to do. Yeah,
That's
Sure.
very powerful.
that's
Uh,
pretty much.
we have another show, we call it the Human Resources Development and Management 101 Conversations.
Mhm.
Throughout our conversations, it kept on coming to me to say, Amit will be a very, very good participant in that
Yeah.
I'll be
program.
more than happy. I'll
And,
be
and,
more.
and for your information, it is we hold it in partnership with our National Institute of People Management. In
Okay.
fact, let me say we are more than national. It's the Institute of Management called IPM in South
Mhm.
Africa. You can check it. It's ipm.co.za.
Right.
And we are just starting now to bring continental guest speakers into the show. We have just decided that we are going global with it as well. And I know the CEO of the IPM, Dr. Jerry Gule, will get the opportunity to listen to the podcast that we're going to make out of here. I'd like to share it with him. And maybe one of the good days, who knows, we could have you coming, joining as one of the participants in that show.
I am always enthused about these possibilities, so I'll be
Mm,
more than happy.
wonderful.
Mm.
Mishti is doing great work for us that side in identifying people like yourselves. So we are really grateful. And I'm actually enjoying being a listener these days and being just a student of these great ideas. And so we do very well, Mishti. I don't know how you feel. I just feel
Yes,
privileged that we can have guests like Amit share such wonderful
absolutely,
information.
absolutely, Sam, and it's a privilege to have a platform like this. Where I keep using this word, and with your permission, I'll use it again. To be able to build a strong Ubuntu bridge between the two countries. where we
Yes.
can connect at a very humane level and at the same time process a lot of knowledge and experience that our experts and guests bring to the table. So that has been amazing. We've had some amazing guests so far, and each time we have a show, we realize that wow, it keeps getting better. So that's definitely really exciting, and I'm very grateful that for your trust in helping me do this and creating the bridge. So that
Beautiful.
that is amazing.
Right.
And
We have, we have,
Amit is a
sorry, sorry.
fantastic singer also, but I don't know whether he'll be kind enough to.
No, no.
No,
You,
he won't be.
there's
He's
something.
been too kind so far. Yeah.
There's a book by Peter Singer that talks
Yeah.
about systems thinking, which
Uh-huh.
is which is the, learning organization talks about the five disciplines of a learning
Mm.
organization. That's systems thinking. Okay. Uh, I have to resort to systems singing. You have to put something into my system for me to be able to produce
Uh,
music.
Okay.
so
Good.
we need to follow a different system for talent development here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's check out. I mean, we can just use the last 5 minutes reflecting on what we brought out. What stand
Mm.
out for you, Amit. What are you taking away with you from this conversation? What is feedback for us from your side?
No, I think the only feedback is that you're doing a splendid job of holding these conversations because not only I think to me becoming a part of something like this it allows me to kind of just go back to those concepts and understand their worth, and then listen to you people as well because invariably uh, in this conversation of about 2 hours, what has also happened is that it was almost like a coaching conversation because there were questions that were being asked. And how many times did it happen that you asked me a question and I had to think about it? Which basically is a clear indication that perhaps I had not thought of it before because that question was not asked before.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful, wonderful forum where this cross pollination of ideas happens and it's a win win at both ends. So I think it's incredible, that you're doing this. And I'm thankful to you for you to do this and for me to get an opportunity, to become a part of it.
We are honored to have you.
I'm
Um,
honored to be here,
Beautiful.
excited, honored, and enthralled completely. Thanks, Lord.
Mishti, your closing remarks?
Yes, I think what was very interesting about today's conversation was the aspect of voice and language in coaching. And Amit comes from the space of wanting to master a lot of things. The art of mastery is what Amit talks a lot about, and how he spoke about using the gift of language, the gift of voice. That was a very interesting perspective that coaches don't really speak about. So I'm very grateful that that was touched upon, and of course, he has very in-depth knowledge and experience about a lot of models around coaching. So that was a very, very useful conversation. So on behalf of Sam and me, I would just want to say, Amit, thank you so much for your time and more power to you for all your ideas and all your plans. And we will be very excited to read your book once it comes out.
It's just one day that shall happen. Yeah.
Of course,
Thanks.
that shall happen. There's no case era to that.
Yeah. I cannot
Yeah.
help you. I cannot thank you enough, Sam, for letting me, onto this platform. And Mishti and I spoke about it, I think, months ago, and then the conversation kind of fell out, and then we spoke about it again, and I'm glad that it happened this time. So a big thank you to Mishti, and I'm indebted that you brought me to this forum. Thanks a lot to the both of you for this wonderful opportunity. It was great.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. And we thank
Thanks.
those viewers that tuned in and many, many other listeners that will be tuning onto our podcast that we're going to produce out of this conversation. So we will publish it on our podcast on social media. I'm sure you'll get more people giving you feedback on an ongoing basis. This is a monthly show. It happens on the first Tuesday of every month. It is the Applied Professional and Executive Coaching 101 conversation, where we talk about anything coaching. It's a conversation we have with the HR professionals, the coaches, and it is cutting across cultures, across continents, across borders. So next month, we will be talking to somebody from the East African coast of the continent,
Oh,
from
wonderful.
Kenya specifically. And I'm looking forward to that, and I'm sure we will continue building many bridges. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's very late in India at the moment. Enjoy the evening, enjoy the week, and we will definitely stay in touch. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks to our viewers and listeners. And we can stay in the studio a little bit as we say goodbye to our listeners.
Goodbye
Take
to
care.
everybody.